Welcome back to the Skiff. I'm going to bring in Rob Cunningham. He's in the green room. I see him there, and we're going to talk crypto. Rob, good morning, man. Thanks for coming on.
Good morning, Todd. What a week.
Yeah, I just think we got to keep going. The only way out of it is through it, I guess.
Well, he embodied the anti-fragile kind of mentality where the greater the pressure, the greater the strength.
Good point.
More tests, more trials, more tribulations. No matter, he's to me the living embodiment of, although we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll fear no evil.
Yeah.
He would go into the most woke, the most MK Ultra, the most psyoped and programmed world, which forces of darkness have always targeted the youth and the impressionable and the vulnerable.
Yes.
And that was like I think President Trump said this morning, he won the youth vote. Republicans never, ever win the youth vote. You talk about threatening the franchise of the global power brokers, take away the 30 and under crowd. And Charlie was a real threat.
Wow, well said. I completely agree. I've been thinking the exact same thing. I mean, been trying to figure out who he threatened, and that's definitely it with the kids, and then also there's a lot of other people he threatened. So
well, and Todd, let's talk about the elephant in the room.
Mm-hmm.
He boldly and beautifully and powerfully promoted Jesus Christ.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point. Yeah. So if you've noticed, we've been talking about this, well, to the audience. If you've noticed, we've been talking about Christianity and the attack on it globally, and I think this was another battle in that war over the last few days. So yes, we're going to stay on that issue and have more guests on later in the show with Robert Amsterdam to talk about that specifically. But let me read you something that was on Zero Hedge this morning, which I found interesting. And this is obviously a response to what's happening with the Fed and with some of the crypto issues in the Treasury. But Russia just dropped a bomb at the Eastern Economic Forum. The U.S. is plotting a $37 trillion debt reset by weaponizing crypto and rewriting the gold playbook. A two-pronged strategy: tokenize the debt into stable coins, then devalue it, followed by a gold revaluation to restore trust. Sound familiar? It should. We've seen this game before in 34 and 71, only this time it's happening in the cloud. Tom Teague's been on, another contributor, talking about this is a way to provide demand for the Treasury market where all our debt sits. What say you on all this? What do you think?
Well, Todd, it's profoundly simple when terminology is clarified. Okay. What we have is sovereign debt and counterfeit debt. Okay. We have debt that can be issued by a legitimate nation like America, and we can have a Federal Reserve that prints stuff, counterfeit money out of thin air. Okay. We have over 40% of the currency that's in circulation in America, in the world, in American dollars, has been put there since COVID.
Yeah.
5 years, 40% of all the American currency floating around, debasing our value, causing inflation, debasing our purchasing power, and destroying our standard of living because they clicked a couple of buttons and they printed money out of thin air. Okay, so the ultimate issue that repairs America's economy and the world economy is sound money. Sound money for the average person that doesn't study this is something that has three elements to it. The three elements are: sound money has to be a unit of account, which means the accounting has to be perfect. I mean, math is math. 2 + 2 = 4. The records have to be perfect and universally trusted. A unit of account, a store of value, an ounce of gold or X amount of ounces of silver, whatever that store of value is, it's got to be the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. It's supposed to be 2 + 2 = 4. And a medium of exchange. If people don't trust the record keeping or the accounting, and they think you're tipping the scale or you're shaving off the edges of the gold and the measure of gold and silver is being polluted, or you're putting lead in the middle of the gold bar and calling it gold, all of this runs on trust, Todd.
Yeah.
Okay. So The Federal Reserve does not create sound money. The Federal Reserve is a fraud. The Federal Reserve is a foreign, non-governmental institution that was essential to the hijacking of the constitutional republic known as America. There's a reason that we have never audited the Fed. We can't look at the books. There is no gold behind whatever it issues. It is a counterfeit control system that issues unbacked, unaccountable junk debt. That is very different than a treasury bill from the Treasury of the United States.
So you're saying this is really interesting, and I've never I've thought about it in certain shades of this, but I've talked about strategic devaluation. What you're saying is that this was an attack on the U.S. by issuing all this counterfeit debt in order to destroy us, and this reaction to it and the plan that the Trump administration may be doing is to defeat that threat or that attack, and the enemies of the U.S. don't like it. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Why was President Kennedy shot?
Yeah.
Why do we need a United States Treasury that's put in place to manage our domestic monetary system and create currency backed by gold and silver? And then all of a sudden we need these foreigners that are not federal, that have no reserves, from outside the United States, right after the Organic Act of 1871 created the District of Columbia. And then in the dark of night, we have to create this perverted, secret, collaborative cartel that got together in 1910 in Jekyll Island, Georgia, and ran through a Federal Reserve Act. That was the Obamacare of its day. Obamacare wasn't about health care. It was about control. It was about monitoring. It was about surveillance of American. It was an entrapment system. The label of the bill has nothing to do with the intentions of the legislation. The Federal Reserve Act was about controlling and harvesting the energy and taking control over. Along with the Federal Reserve came the income tax, came the IRS, came the rules and the regulations, and the lien, first claim lien on our life and liberty in a nation that was born with unalienable rights.
And then it went global, right?
And then it became the world reserve currency.
Well, I mean, the central bank system.
Now the whole world has to be in obedience to this non-governmental organization that hijacked America in 1913. Now the world's got to obey.
Yeah.
And if you talk about that, if you talk about getting rid of the Federal Reserve, which is owned by entities outside the United States of America, then you're putting a spotlight on the fact that America is not really America.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if you talk about it, whether you're Kennedy or whether you're Abraham Lincoln or whether you're Donald Trump or whether you're a MAGA supporter or whether you want to put the spotlight on Jerome Powell because he's too slow, anything that threatens this global monopoly, whether you're Charlie Cook going after the youth or you're MAGA or you're Trump or you're trying to get rid of the Fed and you're trying to look, fraud vitiates everything.
Yeah.
The junk debt that's in America that's been pumped onto the backs of you and me and mortgages and credit cards and student loans and the world, if that junk debt was issued illegitimately, wipe it off the books. If there's legitimate debt because America bought oil reserves or gold, or America sold F-15s to Saudi Arabia and Saudi Arabia owns this money, honor those deals.
Yeah.
But do not honor something that was printed out of thin air. When we go to the bank and get a mortgage, there's not a pile of cash sitting in the vault. They're not waiting for us to show up so they can go and get the cash they just hit a button and create a mortgage amount of money out of thin air, and then we pay 8% on that mortgage for 30 years.
Yeah.
So it's a usury, counterfeiting, cartel control system. And if you threaten the cartel threatens you.
Well, it's even I know you know this, but our audience might not. It's even worse than that, because they print this money, and then guess what? If, like you said, if you threaten us or threaten the system somewhere like Libya, they use the U.S. State Department, the full weight of the U.S. government, the U.S. military, to do regime change, to wreak havoc, to destroy, to assassinate, to start wars. And on down the line, that's the seed of the forever wars, right? It's an instrument they use.
Todd, the old adage that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. If the root of evil is the love of money and you wanted to control the world, you'd want to control the world's money.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you give the same, it's called the Triffin dilemma. The conflict is embedded in the scenario here. If you give the world's most powerful nation control over the world's most powerful military and the world reserve currency, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. That's the definition of Washington, D.C. Absolute corruption.
Yeah. I was listening to Dr. Kirk Moore on Tucker last night talking about just the complete corruption of the medical system by money, and how you can't even trust your doctor anymore. And
well, it's rooted in pharmakia, Todd. I mean,
yeah.
if you go back again, my people are destroyed for their lack of knowledge. What is pharmakia? It's sorcery. It's chemical. It's like none of us were born with a chemical deficiency.
Yeah.
And yet they have convinced us that they have to not cure anything, but treat us for life with their petroleum products that generate a bunch of young kids that want to run and kill people. Yeah. I mean, look at the autism rate. Todd, I was reading a report from, I think it was Dr. McCullough and somebody else last week that said in the 50s, the United States government budgeted exactly $0 for catastrophic illnesses and pandemics or crisis illnesses. Today, it's $1.4 trillion a year.
What a deal.
We went, how did we go in the 50s from relatively a healthy nation to an autism of 1 in 100,000 to 1 in 33?
Yeah. No, that's up in your grill for sure. Let me ask you something. Georgia always comes back to this for some reason. You had the Georgia Guidestones. The Federal Reserve was started in Georgia. It's like it's the center of something. You have the most corrupt government in Georgia that's backed
Fulton County, the only state in America. For those that don't know this, haven't been paying attention, the only state in America that had 100% of its counties by Dominion systems and put in the Dominion voting system.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and now you got Raffensperger wanting to run for governor. I don't know how that's going to go, but what is it about Georgia? I've tried to look at this. I know it's a transportation hub back, and that's why Atlanta was started. But it's just kind of weird, man. And, you and I are from there, and it's just, do you have any sense as to why Georgia is so important to the dark side?
I will tell you that some cursory research that I've done, Todd, indicated that early, well before the Republic, the colony or even before the colony of Georgia, this area was basically a dystopian, if you will, outcast. It's almost like Australia when they used to send all of the scum of the earth. They'd send them out to a penal colony.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's almost as if Georgia needs an exorcism.
Yeah.
The state of Georgia, there's a demonic spirit, a darkness about it. There's a cover that red, white, and blue, Georgia, patriotic, and MAGA. We've had a Republican governor, Senate, and Congress forever, and they vote like a blue state.
Yeah, completely.
And if you follow the money, that's the only thing that I can explain, that our government does not reflect who we are. To give you another point, California is this close, only second to Texas in the total number of true conservative voters from a population standpoint, but they're demon possessed in 3 cities.
Yeah.
They own the media, they own the government, they own the control. They've got the George Soros apparatus around the neck. But in total number of conservatives, California is not a liberal state. It's a liberal government. And that's the issue that we're facing in Georgia. We have been hijacked from within, and call a spade a spade. We have demonic people that are worshiping something other than the wishes of the people that live in Georgia.
Well, that's of course all you got to do is look at some of the images coming out, some of the Georgia GOP leadership parties they had, which were pretty bad, pretty shocking.
Yeah.
Trump this morning is talking about, well, maybe we got to go after George Soros. You think that'll actually happen?
Absolutely, 1,000%.
Hmm.
Yeah, 1,000%. Look, if you want to know who's in the slipstream of a hidden bank that prints counterfeit money, that funnels money into dark places without accountability, like the CIA, who then opens up the floodgates of that money to 55,000 NGOs that include all kinds of derivatives of the open society and George Soros and Lord Malik Brown and this entire cartel of demonic freaks. If you want to know who's in the middle of that formula that's distributing counterfeit money to 55,000 NGOs the world over, look no further than George Soros.
Yeah. And for a long time, since his youth with the Nazis. What about you? I have a sense, and I've had this sense for a long time, the school shootings, there's something there. To me, it's pattern recognition. It's young kids that are vulnerable, maybe living in their mother, maybe a broken family, maybe mental issues or whatever. But it seems to be that same type of person over and over again, just like with this shooter, just like with the Trump shooter. I think there's a pattern there, and something's going on. Somebody's behind what's happening to these kids. I mean, there's been reports of, FBI agents and chats or whatever, but have you any sense of that?
Yeah, Todd, there's a malignancy in the program, a glitch in the matrix. And let's go back to 24 years ago at 9/11. I mean, the last 25 years, the kids that have been born in the last 25 to 30 years have been, in many respects, lobotomized, programmed. They've been MK Ultra'd, if you will. They've been drugged. They've been social medialized. They have been,
pornography,
obsession, consumption of lust. If it feels good, do it. The dark art of divide and conquer through all of these media channels and all of these just false idol worship trails that are basically doing a number. And when you go in and start messing with the programming and the circuit board of kids at 2 or 3 or 5 that spend 8 hours a day on social media, and I talked to a guy that ran a youth group in the Southeast United States, and he said, if you think about it, these kids are trying to run 8 or 9 different personalities. They have to have a personality for their parents, for their church, for their school, for their football team, for TikTok, for Facebook, for Instagram, for you name it. And there's a different set of groups and values and pressures. And I want to be cool in this group, and I want to be cool in this group, and I want to make my mom and dad proud, and I want to go to church and put on my best Sunday, and then I want to go drink beer with my football. But so the level of psychosis in trying to manage 9 personalities is beyond if you don't have laws and principles and you don't know who you are and whose you are, and you're trying to manage, you talk about the ultimate Sybil kind of psychosis that takes place for people that are unanchored in absolute laws and principles. They don't stand a chance in this environment.
Yeah, I think you're exactly. Just look at the social media right now after the Kirk assassination. I mean, it's horrific. Let's talk more in depth on crypto real quick. What's the latest on XRP and the whole, I guess, implementation of the system?
Well, the answer, Todd, to a broken counterfeit Federal Reserve system that no one trusts
Mm-hmm.
is trustlessness. Trustlessness requires 100% transparency and accountability in a unit of account, a store of value, and a medium of exchange. India doesn't need to trust America, and America doesn't need to trust China, and China doesn't need to trust Russia, and Russia doesn't need to trust Israel. The math is math is math. Let me see the books. Give me 180 sets of books. Get rid of all the middlemen.
Mm-hmm.
I want to trade. I want to trade. And a stable coin is a digital dollar representation of a sovereign currency. Okay. And it's one-to-one backed, inspected on a monthly basis. There's your accountability. You can't print them out of thin air. If you don't have $1 billion or $100 million or $100 in U.S. Treasuries, it's a tier one asset. You can't create a stable coin.
That's the whole demand issue that Teague has been talking about, because you've got all these treasuries out there that, you know, could collapse in value if things don't go well, and the demand could collapse, and we'd have currency issues and reserve currency, you know, all of that. But if you have a stable coin where they have to back it by treasuries, so they have to
But
buy
Todd,
it.
and
Yeah.
it's even better than that.
Yeah.
Because guess who else wants a stable coin besides nations? Amazon, Apple,
Sure.
Microsoft. Why? Because if all Microsoft or Amazon or Apple or Google has to do is go buy treasury bonds to back their Google stablecoin, and then they can make payments, they can make payroll, they can pay their vendors and cut out 8% or 7% of that middleman cost that goes to Jamie Dimon at the Federal Reserve. Now you've got every conglomerate and corporation and nation that is lining up to buy the sovereign debt of a nation.
Yeah.
So you diversify the customer base that wants to buy American treasuries, and the definition of stable coin is the same whether you're Argentina, Apple, America, or Azerbaijan. The rules for a stable coin are stable coin or stable coin. It's got to be backed by a tier one asset.
Yeah.
And the tier one asset's a US dollar, a T-bill, a note, gold, or silver. And it has to be inspectable. You have to be able to validate and verify it is the asset backing that debt is there. It's not a trust me, bro. It's
let me throw a comment up here how do you keep it separate from a digital surveillance system?
Beautiful question. That is a brilliant question, because number one, if you have total transparency and you have cryptographic security and you have ownership property rights, my identity is my identity. Okay. My ability to, the issue of security is absolutely paramount. And the fact that that is still an issue that people want to make absolutely certain that my wallet is my wallet, my data is my data, my gold is my gold, my 401k is my 401k, my medical records are my medical records. The thing that we have to start doing, Todd, is getting away from this Swiss cheese world of accounts where you and I and everybody listening to this call may have 50 different accounts. And all of those are vulnerable to hack. All of those are vulnerable to invasion. And you have a bunch of infrastructure people out there that are trying to sell middleware and sell servers and sell firewalls and sell monitoring systems and security for the router, and then the whack AI that's monitoring the intrusions, and then people trying to fix the leak of the credit card users and social security numbers at American Express. Todd, we're never going to the human can never outpace the speed of AI.
True.
And quantum computers that can do 1 trillion calculations a second.
Yeah.
So what we have to do is figure out, if we think doing nothing and staying old school is going to be our answer to not being surveilled like we're being surveilled now, we've lost our minds. We're not putting any thought into it. Okay. What we have to do is figure out what is unalienable, what is sovereign, what are my rights, and how can that be secured and safe in my hands, unalienable rights without anybody else having a first lien or me being surveilled in a digital police state. That is the question. Okay.
So Amy has another question. Who controls the stable coin?
Well, it's first of all, the first stable coin in America was the RLUSD, approved in December of 2024 by the New York Department of Financial Services. The most stringent, compliant, difficult regulatory body in the world to get into compliance. And this entity requires a monthly audit of one-to-one backing. Behind every stable coin in circulation, there has to be a one-to-one tier one asset, like a T-bill, a treasury, or a note.
Yeah.
Okay. So who controls the stable coin? Well, there's issuers and there's regulators, and then there's owners. So Ripple Labs can issue the stable coin. The New York Department of Financial Services, underneath the United States Treasury, who reports to the President of the United States, can monitor and regulate the veracity of that asset, that asset is what it says it is. And then the owners of those stable coins can be anybody that wants to buy an RLUSD or interact with the digital dollar of America. Because now it goes from the issuer into the hands of a government, a conglomerate, or me or Todd Wood. Now, if my digital wallet shows that I have $1,000 in RLUSDs, I have $1,000 in RLUSDs. But here's the thing. The New York Department of Financial Services and the U.S. Treasury are requiring monthly audits and provable assets backing that stable coin. Does that sound like a Federal Reserve note to you?
No, that solves that problem. But I think the real question people have is, okay, we came out recently that the Biden administration was spying on bank accounts across the board of anybody they didn't like. How do you prevent that with a stable coin, like surveilling where you're spending your money, where your money is?
The stable coin is not the issue. It's the security that's the issue. Okay.
Okay.
So if we'll objectively think about, it's not the dime, it's not the dollar, it's not the gold bar, it's not the stable coin, it's not the silver, it's not the platinum. It's the thievery and those people trying to see what you have.
Yeah.
It's not the end item, the stable coin, or 97% of everything in America today is digital, Todd. Today.
Yeah. Well,
If we stop right now, it's all digital.
Yeah.
And in the new environment, when they're going to print new currency that's going to have all kinds of traceability and new technology and new designs and it's going to be issued by the sovereign government known as the United States for America and not the Federal Reserve. And it's not going to say Federal Reserve note on it anymore. When that issuance is put out into the economy, then we have our country back.
Yeah.
We have our sovereignty back. Separate from that is cryptographic encoding, security, digital surveillance, quantum computing, artificial intelligence. And that's why, Donald Trump wants America to be the crypto capital of the world. We must win the AI war. You'll see Melania came out earlier this week and talked about how it's going to be AI learning and education and competency is going to be mandated throughout the school system. You have to know it as to be a native citizen and compete in the world from this day going forward. Like it or not, you're going to have to understand the principles of AI, quantum computing, machine learning, and what we're capable of doing with these godlike quantum computers. We have to learn them. We can't stick our head in the sand anymore.
And that's going to come quicker than most people realize.
Correct. And so the issue is not, is digital assets good or bad? We have digital money today. The question is, how fast can we get our security perfected? Because evil is going to be evil, and evil's not going away. We're not going to eradicate evil, and evil's going to always try to put its hand in the cookie jar. The question is how fast can we build a cookie jar that they can't put their hand in? That's the question. It's not stop everything right now until I have 100% assurance that the thieves aren't going to try to be thieves. Because until you can tell me the thieves aren't going to stop being thieves, I'm not going to eat a cookie.
Do you think Trump? Yeah, I get it. Do you think Trump is going to keep Lisa Cook out of the next?
No, I think he's using Lisa Cook in a brilliant way to expose the supernatural essence of the Federal Reserve, its hubris and its arrogance. She is an echo of Trump saying he was going to remove Powell. And then the Bloomberg reporter asked, Powell, what do you think about the president says he's going to remove you? He goes, can he do that? He said, no.
Yeah.
I mean, we had Alan Greenspan used to say the same thing. When American people understand that the Fed believes they're not touchable by the President of the United States, it exposes the fraud. That the Federal Reserve is above the President of the United States, and that's not the way our Constitution is set up. That's not the way our Declaration is set up. So now we have not only Federal Reserve Chairman Powell giving the middle finger to the president, we got Lisa Cook, who's a DEI idiot, who can't balance a checkbook, telling the president, go kiss my ass. You can't get rid of me or Powell because we're with the Fed and we're above you. Well, the only way they can think that in their head is to understand that the Fed was superimposed on top of the United States of America and is above and beyond the reach of the President of the United States. And the last time I checked, Todd, neither Jerome Powell or Crook or Cook or whatever her name was were elected by anybody.
Yeah, it's a banking cartel, as you said, and it controls everything. They're trying to get her out before the next meeting. I don't know if that's going to happen because, Trump wants rates down and Powell's preventing that. So should be an interesting fight. Anything else, Rob, that needs to get out?
Well, it looks like there's about a 90% probability on the betting markets that we'll see likely up to a 50 basis point rate cut next week by the Fed. Mm-hmm. And when you see that, that's going to be a match. It's going to light fire. Okay.
Yeah. The economy.
We have, President Trump has said we have about $17 trillion already secured in the totality of tariffs since he's been reelected and taken office in January. Here we are, 9 months in? He's got $17 trillion committed to the United States. Inflation is down. We just saw that they cooked the books by 1 million jobs that never happened under the previous administration. So unemployment is weak, inflation is down, revenue is up, and Powell has interest rates at the highest of any other nation in the world. And he won't bring them down, not because America doesn't need them to come down and we don't need relief and we don't need to have greater spending ability. He's using the fig leaf of it might cause inflation when there is none. And he kept those rates artificially high based on an artificial million jobs that never took place.
Yeah.
If you bring that down to the reality that we had a weak economy a year ago, he needs to do catch-up rate cuts.
You would think that the Fed is supposed to be independent because they're supposed to be not political. I mean, this is obviously
that's the biggest lie in the world, Todd. That's
I completely agree. I mean, my point is, you would think you could use that argument to take it apart because it's not following its charter, even though that charter is nefarious in itself.
The reason that logic doesn't work on a corrupt cartel is it's a corrupt cartel.
Yeah, no kidding. Rob, thank you, man. Really appreciate your time and your insight. Always enjoy it. It's always groundbreaking. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Here's the American history lesson they never taught you in school. In 1871, Congress passed something called the Organic Act. Sounds boring, right? Wrong. That act may have fundamentally changed the United States from a sovereign nation into a corporation. Before 1871, America was the United States for America, a constitutional republic. But after 1871, it legally became the United States of America, a corporation owned by foreign interests, primarily the bankers in London. This isn't conspiracy. Go read the act. It created a municipal government for DC, turning the capital into a separate legal entity, not part of the 50 states. That's why DC has its own flag, its own laws, its own police force. And guess what? That flag, 3 stars and bars, represents the trinity of global control: the Vatican, the City of London, and Washington, D.C. These aren't cities, they're city-states, separate from the countries they appear to belong to. The Vatican rules religion. The City of London rules finance. D.C. rules military. This trinity doesn't serve the Constitution, it uses it. And you and I, we're treated like collateral. Ever wonder why your birth certificate has a number? or why your name is in all caps on legal documents, because they treat you like a corporate asset, not a living soul. America was never destroyed from without. It was hijacked from within. And until we wake up and reclaim our republic, we'll keep living in a cage they convinced us was freedom. This isn't about politics, it's about truth. And the truth sets you free.
Whatever backs that intrinsic value, it has to be free from the pressures of a central banking institute, correct?
That's right. Or the pressures of any institution that has the power to force us to accept their edicts. So the central banks are not the government, as I think most of your followers and friends know. Central banks are cartels, private cartels, and they seek the governmental power to force people to accept their funny money as though it was real. And if they take that away, well, then everything falls apart. Unless they're good boys and girls and don't inflate and don't create money out of debt, unless there's a limit to it and the debt is severely, completely reserved to it, could be cashed out and amortized among the investors and so forth. But they never do that because they always put far more obligation on their reserves than the reserves are capable of doing. Just look at every bank in the United States, in the world, their liabilities exceed, their true liabilities, including their investment values, are way in excess of their real reserves. They play with the numbers, they cook the books, they lie to the public, and that's the theory of banking today. It's whatever you have to say and do to trick people into not objecting to having their purchasing power stolen.
There's been massive money creation in the U.S. When they create a lot of money, that devalues our buying power. And this has gone on to such an extent that 40% of all the money that's in existence in the US dollar was now created since the pandemic.
Here you go, guys. Let's play central bank, because it's even easier than what I'm showing you. Originally, when we were on a gold standard, gold and silver were actually the money.
The only way we get out of the rat race of inflation and endless money printing and debt slavery is to return to sound money
This
principles.
is why you need to pay attention right now. History is being made. The world of money is about to get flipped in a matter of weeks. What happens when Trump announces the end of the Federal Reserve Board, exposing its fraudulent nature? Global debts, forgiven. Gold, soon to escape its decades of suppressed value. Silver, perhaps one of the greatest values at today's price. And the future of fiat debt currencies, replaced by sound, sovereign stablecoins on a ledger of trustlessness. Say goodbye to the old system. Our new era of money is here.
The president has said we will make the United States the world capital of crypto. He's appointed an AI and crypto czar. The head of the Presidential Council of Advisors for Digital Assets, the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, all of them strong crypto supporters. Every member of his cabinet has disclosed they personally own Bitcoin. His Treasury, Commerce, and Labor secretaries, all huge proponents of crypto. The chairs of the SEC, CFTC, FDIC, OCC, and the SBA, all strongly supporting crypto. This is a 180-degree turnaround from the Biden administration. Same thing in the Congress. The chairs of the House Financial Services Committee, the Senate Banking Committee, and the chairs of the Digital Asset Subcommittees, hugely supportive of crypto. A majority of both parties in Congress now support crypto. This is a total reversal of what we've seen over the past 4 years. Remember, in 2019, the SEC and FINRA issued a statement. The OCC issued a similar statement in 2021. The Fed issued a similar statement in 2022. All of those statements said the same thing. Banks may not custody crypto. Banks can't trade it, they can't hold it, they can't engage in any way. And this froze out, due to the Biden administration, banking engagement in crypto. On March 7th, the OCC issued an update. That was followed in April by the Fed and May by the SEC and FINRA. And all three of the updates rescinded their prior rules. Banks are now permitted to engage with crypto with no restrictions, any different from everything else that they do. So they're allowed to deal with crypto the same way they're allowed to deal with stocks and bonds and money. And the Department of Labor, remember when Fidelity announced that they were going to allow all of its 401k accounts to buy Bitcoin? Fidelity, the biggest 401k provider in the country, the Department of Labor immediately issued a notice saying that the Employee Benefit Security Administration will investigate any 401k plan that does that and take appropriate action. Scared the hell out of every 401k plan in the country and froze out Fidelity's efforts to put Bitcoin in 401ks. That was in 2022. Department of Labor rescinded that notice. So your clients who have a 401k are now going to be able to be investing in Bitcoin directly. The SEC in May added Coinbase to the S&P 500. Now, you figure, okay, Coinbase is finally big enough to be able to be included in the top 500 companies. And you know, when a company gets first added to the S&P, it's because their assets are finally big enough to meet the minimum value. That would expect you to put Coinbase where? You know, number 400, 450, 475. It came in at 157. What took the S&P so long to say yes to allowing Coinbase in the S&P? Because they didn't want crypto in the index. They've totally reversed their position. And then, of course, there's Jamie Dimon, who in 2019 said, I'd fire in a second anyone who trades Bitcoin. They're stupid. In May, he said, we're going to allow our customers to buy Bitcoin. And just a few days ago, they announced that they will allow you to use BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF as collateral for loans. And Jamie said, I defend your right to own Bitcoin. This is the ultimate reversal. We know that the president wants to create the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. What a lot of folks don't realize is that 28 states are racing to do the same thing. 2 of them have already passed the law. We've got 65 million American adults who own it. 83% say they're long-term believers in this technology. 72% say they're going to regard this as a key component in their strategy. 69% plan to add to their holdings in the next 2 or 3 years. If you're not letting them do it with you, they're going to do it without you. They're not going to wait on you. They're not going to be dependent on you. And millennials, 83% of them own crypto among the millionaires. Teenagers. T. Rowe Price does a study of teens, and I said, if I gave you $100 to invest, what would you buy? 57% said they buy crypto. Only 38% said they buy stocks. More than half said crypto is the future of investing. Billionaires own crypto, endowment funds own crypto, pension funds own crypto, hedge funds, half of them own crypto, 3/4 of family offices own crypto. And when the Bitcoin ETFs came out, all the public companies had to announce whether or not they were allocating. Immediately, with the Bitcoin ETF launch in Q1 of 24, over 900 public companies announced, we own those ETFs. The number is growing every single quarter. Already 90 public companies have Bitcoin in their treasury, and it's projected that 1/4 of them will by the end of the decade. A lot of people don't realize that among the biggest holders of Bitcoin in the world, US and China. And among you, half of the advisors in this country personally own crypto, although only still 20% are recommending it to clients. And all of that's just the beginning.
Well, it is my absolute honor, Cool Family, to be sitting with one of the most historic figures in all of banking research and history, the author, the legend, Mr. G. Edward Griffin, who wrote The Creature from Jekyll Island. Not only do I have this opportunity to speak with him, but I'm doing it from his home, in his office, where he has lived since 1962. And besides me personally meeting with President Trump, this is one of the second best honors I've ever had in my professional career. So, Mr. Griffin, thank you so much for joining and agreeing to this interview. Thank you.
I feel very, very honored.
Well, let me jump right into this because there are millions, if not tens of millions of people the world over that revere you, they respect your work, they've read your book, they understand the contribution that you've made to society from an educational standpoint. Like, what is the Federal Reserve? How did we get to where we are? Why are we at this crossroad? And why have we been basically entangled in a web of lies, inflation, and debt slavery? If we don't study our history, we're doomed to repeat it. And you are the master history teacher and professor to help us all begin to understand the con that happened to us and how we get out of this. And then we're going to jump into maybe some conjecture, but how do we prevent from backsliding into this system once we get out of it? That's most importantly. So I have 3 questions I'd love to ask you, and you take as long as you need to answer these questions. But, you know, the first most leading question, I guess it may be considered leading, is what are your thoughts on a system where every single transaction between all parties on the system happen on an open, transparent, public blockchain, that the transactions are recorded and cannot be edited once the transaction has taken place? That the idea of transparency and accountability for all, or you can't participate, how does that in theory ring important?
Well, of course it does. I'm glad you said in theory, because the theory is good. The execution, isn't always according to theory. I remember it was some time ago when Bernard von Nothaus and I got together, and he had read my book, and he thought it was a good idea to issue a new money system. He called it the Liberty Dollar. It was backed by silver. And he talked to me. He said, I got this idea from your book. And I said, well, what's the idea? And he told me about it. And I said, well, it's a great idea, I think. It's exactly what we need. Except, I said, I don't think you want to call it a dollar, because now you're in legal conflict with the government. They don't like you to use the word dollar unless it's their dollar. And, of course, their dollar doesn't mean dollar anymore either, but they like to have a monopoly over it. He said, oh, they will leave me alone. I said, well, they're not going to leave you alone, you know. He said, well, I'm not worried. Look, he said, we have this thing called the internet now, and there's no way they can control the internet. You know, we've got it all. In theory, they can't touch us. It's all in the sky, and it's beyond their control. And I said, maybe, that's all. And I said, I like the idea, but I said, don't use dollar. Well, it turns out, of course, they do control the internet to a large extent. We just didn't know it at the time how they were going to do it. So maybe yes and maybe no. And of course, they did put Bernard in jail for issuing money they called it was counterfeit money, because they used the word dollar on it. Now, I don't claim any credit for that, because I hated to see Bernard. Well, he didn't go to jail. He wound up with one of those bracelets around his ankle for a year or so, and had to live in a certain place in Malibu. Not a bad place, by the way, but anyway, Bernard was so certain that the theory would hold up, and I don't claim credit for that. I'm always skeptical on any new idea, and I think anybody should be. When you're putting something new out there, you should challenge it and say, what could they possibly do to make this serve their purposes? Now, let's face facts. We're up against a very powerful and a very experienced cartel, bigger than a cartel. It's a cartel of cartels. They like to call it the New World Order. And these people are not going to sit by and just watch these things happen. They have rooms, if not buildings, full of planners and schemers, and they work out scenarios. Well, if this happens, what do we do? It's kind of like a military operation.
Yes, sir.
When the armies go into a theater of battle, they figured out as far as they could all the possible things that the enemy or the object of the target nation would do, and they've got a scenario for it. And I'm sure everything we're doing today is in their scenario book. They've known long before we even thought about it that we would be doing this, and they have a scenario. They think, I can assure you, right now, they've considered this very issue. They think they have a way around it, or they wouldn't be who they are, you know. So with that caveat, I say it's a wonderful idea, and I'm all for it. And the important thing is to get out of the grips of this monopolistic system that they're trying to build. And I've said many times that I think even if we don't know all the intricacies of the proposals or the theories that you're talking about, even if we don't know what their counteraction is planned to be, we do have one thing that we can fall back on, which is, shall we say, the gold standard of all of these things. And that is that as long as we have a choice of choosing the monetary system we want, then somehow or other, it'll be to our advantage. There will be a free flow of monetary value through something we call money. Now, it might not be the money of the government. If it turns out that the government money is fiat money and it's losing its purchasing power by the hour, more and more people will stop using it. That is, if they're allowed to stop using it. So if they have one of these laws in place, legal tender law, that you've got to use this money regardless of how lousy it is, well, then they've got you hooked. But as long as there's no legal tender law forcing you to use any particular money, and you have freedom to choose anything, you'll choose the best one after a while. You may not know what the best one is, but after 6 months, 9 months, a year goes by, all the phony stuff, all the unworkable systems will fall away, and almost everybody will line up for the good money because they can see by experience. It's the one thing is certain. If a monetary system is good, or anything else is good, you don't have to force people to seek it out. If it's bad, you try it and pass a law to force them to take it. So why do they always force us to take it by a law? We know right out of the gate that it's bad. Otherwise, they wouldn't bother with that. So back to your question. I think it's a wonderful idea. I'm greatly impressed by what you've told me on this, and I think it has all the possibilities of doing that. I'm just saying that in order to be sure that it's going to work out, we have to be very careful and make sure that there is no way for them to deny us an option not to use it if we choose not to. That would be the only caveat I have. Otherwise, let's go and do it.
Wow, it's such sage advice. And just earlier when we were speaking, it hit me like a ton of bricks that if we are going to have a free market with free will parties trading amongst themselves and buying and selling and doing commerce, only in a free market with free choice can a monetary system succeed. Otherwise, it's being forced and imposed upon us for control purposes. And in comes the inflation, which is theft, and in comes the ultimate demise of the system throughout history. Anytime they force a monetary system and they force a single currency or a world reserve currency or a new world order coin or whatever, they want to restrict all your options, they're going to then pass laws to engineer their monopoly into place.
Exactly.
And then politicians and congressmen and senators, being who they are, they overpromise. They have to pump and inflate the currency supply up to meet those false promises, and sooner or later that mathematical equation ends at zero.
That's right.
They
Absolutely.
They go bankrupt.
So we don't have to be so smart. All we have to know is give us freedom of choice, and that is the ultimate solution.
That is wonderful. That is wonderful. And so to my next question then, you've emphasized in your work throughout your amazing book and all of your talks and research the importance of the intrinsic value of money. There has to be value associated. It can't be paper backed by paper, as the president of El Salvador has become so famous for recently in coining that phrase. But talk about the importance of this intrinsic value being free from central banks being able to inflate or pervert or twist or recalculate that value. The fixed unit of value, whether it's gold or silver or whatever backs that intrinsic value, it has to be free from the pressures of a central banking institute, correct?
That's right. Or the pressures of any institution that has the power to force us to accept their edicts. So the central banks are not the government, as I think most of your followers and friends know. Central banks are cartels, private cartels, and they seek the governmental power to force people to accept their funny money as though it was real. And if they take that away, well, then everything falls apart. Unless they're good boys and girls and don't inflate and don't create money out of debt, unless there's a limit to it and the debt is severely, completely reserved to it, could be cashed out and amortized among the investors and so forth. But they never do that because they always put far more obligation on their reserves than the reserves are capable of doing. Just look at every bank in the United States, in the world, their liabilities exceed, their true liabilities, including their investment values, are way in excess of their real reserves. They play with the numbers, they cook the books, they lie to the public, and that's the theory of banking today. It's whatever you have to say and do to trick people into not objecting to having their purchasing power stolen from them. So as long as that is removed, then I don't know what the solution is, but I know it's there then, because people will choose, and I really do believe in the free market. You may not understand the forces at work, but every individual person in the whole market, millions of people, are voting on these issues every time they make a purchase or refuse to make a purchase. That all couples together with ultimate wisdom. There's no committee of wise men who can figure all that out. Let the market decide, and also a little bit of freedom of choice in there,
Yes.
and we're home free.
Correct. That is correct. I think the ultimate thing I've learned through the last 4 or 5 years, your book and research, is that monetary systems installed by governments are really not about money, they're about control.
Exactly.
They're control systems. They color them with all kinds of language, they color them with every kind of terminology. They tell you, you get more stuff, you'll be more happy, and then they shrink it away, they debase it away, they take it away from you. Whatever it is they do, the entire system from that monetary system lie, they build the medical industrial complex and the media industrial complex and the academia industrial complex. And because they control the financing tool, they control those instruments and those industries that use that tool, because they get to set the rules. But they can't do that. They can only do this in opaqueness, secrecy, lack of accountability, and behind closed doors. If we were able to see everything that they're doing and access artificial intelligence and computers, I mean, I use this as an example. Right at the end of the last Congress, they tried to pass like a 1,570-page continuing resolution bill, and they ran it through AI, and the next day it was 108 pages. And they were able to look through it and cut out all the fat and all the BS and all the payoff and all the money laundering crap. And then in a day, they took legislation down by 95%. So my point of bringing that example up is the power of artificial intelligence to trust but verify. And a system designed around the idea of trustlessness, meaning I don't care what you say, I don't care what your narrative is, I don't care what you promise, I don't care. Show me the evidence, show me the facts, show me the gold in Fort Knox backing the US dollars in circulation. If you move it, I want to know it. If you put more money into circulation, report how much money is in circulation, so we the people can measure how much is actually in. Look at the camera, how much is in Fort Knox? Is it there, and is that ratio to the amount of US dollars in circulation? Is that ratio in balance or out of balance?
That's right. Well, transparency is the thing that politicians always argue. We want more transparency. They all say that, but none of them mean it.
None of them mean it.
Well, there might be a few. We've got to make that admission. Of course, there are a few, but they don't really count because the other 99.9% outvote them. But they always want more transparency, and they want to get rid of the rascals, always on the other side of the aisle, of course.
Right.
But there's no better place to look for scoundrels than in government. When you have a vast amount of money and power concentrated in a institution, I don't care whether it's government or it's corporations or church, even churches, unfortunately.
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely.
It's a magnet that attracts the predator class,
Yes.
and they all want to be inside, posing as they're really humanitarians or very pious people, honest people. We care about you, and we want to make sure that nobody goes hungry, or whatever, all their slogans. They're all good slogans, by the way, but it's all facade. They just want to be in the middle so that if anybody wants a permit, they got to come and do the right thing to get the permit. And that doesn't mean fill out the paperwork. That means to sign the check. And now again, this is an exaggeration because there are plenty of honest transactions that take place. But when you back off to the 30,000-foot level and look down on government operations in general, you'll find more chicanery there, more criminal activity, more fraudulent activity, more lies inside government than you find outside of government. So we know that. Let's face the reality. Why do we just blindly trust people who are in office? We should blindly untrust them. We say, prove
Yes.
to me. I think I've said this before, but Thomas Jefferson answered that question to a friend of his who was a doctor shortly after the signing of the American Revolution. The signing of the Constitution after the American Revolution. And this doctor said, "Well, Mr. Jefferson, how do we make sure that we only have good men in office?" And his response was, "Good men in office?" He didn't say, "Are you kidding?" But he should have. He said, "Speak to me not of good men in office, but let us bind men down with the chains of the Constitution," which is, of course, the answer. And if we retranslate that to modern terms, and for our use, we say, Jefferson was saying, do not trust anybody in government. You can't do it because there are too many criminals in there, and we don't know who they are until after they've committed their crime. We have to assume that there are scoundrels in government. We have to assume that. And therefore, we write the constitutions and the laws and create the agencies so that we're constantly monitoring. This thing you call transparency means we're watching you. And that's why we're watching, not just to make sure that the numbers balance, but to make sure that the scoundrels are under control.
Yes, sir. Amen. Amen. And from a decentralization standpoint, I want to get you to comment on this. I believe, you've heard President Trump say there will not be a central bank digital currency. He's made that as a pledge, and I believe the reason behind that, and I'd love to hear your comment on this theory, is that there's not going to be a CBDC because there are not going to be central banks. There's going to be a treasury, but there, as you said earlier when we were speaking in a previous segment, that the central bank, the Federal Reserve, is not a bank. It's a cartel that runs a bunch of banks, but the Federal Reserve is not a bank.
That's correct.
Correct? Okay.
That's correct.
So we can't have a central bank digital currency issued by an institution that is not American and is not a bank. So why is that important? Because it goes back to free will and freedom of choice and interoperability. If we're gonna level the playing field of 209 nations around the world and let Turkey be Turkey and America be America and Japan be Japan, if we are going to go through the process of leveling the playing field and enabling free will for people to be able to use the currency of their nation, not the New World Order currency or the World Reserve currency or the Davos currency, but each individual country can clean up their own business, have their own currency. We can interoperate between nations to nations and have this kind of global bartering system, but we're free to use or accept or not accept any other currency that we want to, because there's no Bretton Woods enabling faction that makes us the whole world use a type of script that's forced on us by government. What are your thoughts on the fact that if we let America be America and Canada be Canada and England be England and Italy be Italy, and they had the free use of a sovereign currency and it wasn't imposed on them, and even inside of each of those countries they could have free will exchange in a free marketplace, would that not, and eyes on, accountability, trustlessness in all of these nations, wouldn't that extract us or back us out of this kind of centralized New World Order?
Well, I think it would. It sounds like it would. It'd be the ideal thing. But back to the question of vigilance, eternal vigilance. I don't think they mean it when they say they're not going to have a central bank currency. They know there's a lot of opposition to it. Mm-hmm. So the smart scoundrel will say, oh, we'll get rid of it. I believe what's happening now, this is kind of a prediction. I may have mud in my face here in a few months, but I think they're going to try and create the same thing as the central bank digital currency and not call it that. Mm-hmm. They're going to have it run by private institutions, all of which are integrated by government control, and they function as a central bank digital currency, but they have a different name for it. And everybody's so happy we got rid of the central bank digital currency, but they're still stuck with a digital currency that is programmable and is not owned by the citizens. So it's the same thing under a different name. You watch and see how this plays out.
What we're going to do, just out of respect for time and your next schedule and your upcoming appointment, what I would like to do is I'm going to send you the white paper and the information on Ripple and XRP, this kind of, if you will, new generation cryptography, trustlessness system with transparency and accountability. One of the things that I think that you'll find absolutely fascinating, and I want to give you this on behalf of the XRP community and family.
Oh, well, look at
that
this.
is a sample token of the, if you will, the motor oil within the engine of Ripple. And what this technology, this enabling technology does is it guarantees a free will of value exchange across an open internet of value, point to point, person to person, entity to entity, the world over. So if you and I agree that I can give you Sky Miles and you give me coffee beans, and that's an agreement between the two of us, then any form of value that there's a market, we can trade those back and forth without the big hand of government forcing us or telling us, you can't do that, you can't make that trade. This is a free market technology that enables people to interoperate with each other the world over. And it's a system, I believe, that is already architected around the world. It's too big to stop. And I don't believe it in my lifetime or yours, we'll see them be able to stop the progress of this.
Well, that
system.
sounds wonderful. Thank you so much for this.
Yes, sir.
I'm really anxious to read get more information on it because it sounds great, and I will be reading it very carefully. And I sure hope it works out that way.
Thank
I
you,
know
sir.
you've spent a lot of your time and your energy on this thing. You've looked at it carefully, and I'm sure there's good reason for you to be proud of it. So thank you. I will look at it, and you'll be hearing from me.
Thank you for your time.
All right.